You know that every Pakistani leader who addresses the UN General Assembly, he talks about Kashmir. That's one issue that we have been talking about since 1948, raising here at the United Nations. And I think the Prime Minister will again discuss Kashmir, although the focus will be the floods and the devastations caused by the flood. But this year, I think it will lack the punch that this thing usually has, because this year the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, is not coming, and because he is not coming, so that is also a plus point for the Pakistani Prime Minister, because then he will have the floor to himself, and he can highlight this issue, and then Indian diplomats will have the right to respond, which they definitely will use, and they will respond to it. But I think this Kashmir will just be mentioned. It will be not the focus of the Prime Minister's speech this year. This session is also important for Pakistan, because this year the focus is on climate change. And you know that Pakistan is one of the worst victims of this climate change, as now it is internationally recognized that the recent floods in Pakistan were actually caused by this global warming, which is related to climate change. They brought a heat wave, and then came the floods, unprecedented rains, 5 times more than we get in a year. And the whole world acknowledges that Pakistan alone cannot cope with this disaster. So that will give him, this session will give the Prime Minister a unique opportunity, number one, to talk about the problems that Pakistan is facing, the flood itself and its aftermath. I mean, flood is bad enough, but what happens after flood is that any flood brings dozens of waterborne diseases. It brings it destroys crops, and therefore it brings hunger and food shortage. So Pakistan, it is already being predicted that Pakistan will face a huge shortage of food this year, and that Pakistan will also face many waterborne diseases. So the Prime Minister is going to talk about that. But even more important than getting immediate relief for dealing with diseases or with food shortage is the need to highlight the fact that Pakistan is a victim of this climate change. This has been acknowledged internationally. This has been acknowledged by various international organizations. You might have seen a report yesterday where world weather experts got together in Geneva, I think, and they concluded that these floods have been caused by climate change, because of climate change, and therefore Pakistan should ask the international community to compensate it for the losses caused by the flood. And because everybody acknowledges that Pakistan only contributes less than 1% to the pollution that causes global warming and climate change, but it gets about 24% of its adverse effects, and therefore it is a fit case for compensation for the losses caused by climate change. Also, the UN Secretary General, who recently visited Pakistan, and 2 days ago he addressed a news conference in New York, where he shared with the international media what he witnessed in Pakistan. And what he said was that he had never seen anything like this anywhere in the world, that he has been to many places in the world as the UN chief, and before that, in another statement, he also talked about the need for rescheduling or doing something about Pakistan debts, because he says
Pakistan is awash in suffering. The Pakistani people are facing a monsoon on steroids, the relentless impact of epochal levels of rain and flooding. The climate catastrophe has killed more than 1,000 people, with many more injured. Millions are homeless, schools and health facilities have been destroyed, livelihoods are shattered, critical infrastructure wiped out, and people's hopes and dreams have washed away. Every province of the country has been affected.
The sad part is that although there have been some responses from other nations, the United States has committed more than $53 million, and other countries, or the European Union, Canada, others are also coming forward with their assistance. But somehow this flood has not created the impact that it should have, and therefore we do not see countries coming forward to help Pakistan the way they should have. Particularly our friends in the Middle East so far haven't done much for us, and I think this UN session will give the Prime Minister a chance to come and emphasize the need for cooperating with Pakistan, for launching coordinated efforts, for working together to come out of this crisis. It's a crisis, it's a huge crisis. I think the world is going through a crisis itself. You see, the war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic and everything has already shaken the foundation of the very system that the entire global community relies on. And also, it is our failure too. I mean, let's be honest. How do you expect the international community to respond to a country which is facing such a huge natural disaster, and the entire political leadership of that country is focused on what? Internal politics. One very, I would say, sad example of this government versus PTI is PTI's plan to hold a large demonstration outside the UN building in New York on September 23rd, the day the Prime Minister will be addressing the General Assembly. Now imagine, I mean, your Prime Minister, whether you like him or not, whether he was wrongfully elected or legally elected, whether he should have been there or not, but here is a person who is recognized by the rest of the world as Pakistan's Prime Minister. This person will be addressing world leaders inside the United Nations, asking them to what? To help Pakistan deal with this crisis, right? And what will be happening outside? They plan to bring about 10,000 people from all over America to protest against the Prime Minister, to tell the world that this man is not a truly elected Prime Minister, that Mr. Imran Khan is still the legal Prime Minister of the country. We do not recognize him. So what message does it send? It sends a message that please do not cooperate with him. Please do not help him in dealing with the situation. Wait till there is a government change and then come forward and do something. Now, trust me, this is how this message is already being received in Washington. I do engage with US officials. You see that even when they do mention flood, they talk about the devastations caused by the flood and everything, but then quickly the conversation turns to this conflict between the opposition and the government, and then they start asking you whether this government will stay or go, what will be the policies of Imran Khan, will he be as anti-America as he was before he was ousted, what will he do, how would be his relations with Russia and all those things. So what are we doing? What are we doing? We are actually telling the world that flood is not a major issue. The internal Pakistani politics is the real issue. Focus on that. Forget about the floods. Our relations with the United States have been on the downside since 2011 when Osama bin Laden was found and eliminated in Abbottabad. Our government and our opposition, you might have heard that PTI has also hired a person in the United States to lobby for it in Washington. and of course our embassies and are is lobbying for the government as they do and as they should. But again, the focus is not on Pakistan and Pakistan's problems. The focus again is on, work with us. We are the legitimate ruler. We are the people who are better suited to serve you. Imran Khan was bad. Leave him alone. The message from PTI is that, look, these people are not the real rulers. Help us in getting rid of them. We will be your true allies. You see? So, again, when you come and instead of seeking help for your nation, instead of talking about the issues confronting your country, instead of highlighting the need for a greater economic and strategic cooperation with the United States, if you directly or indirectly the message you are sending is that help us stay in power, then obviously other more crucial interests of the country, they get pushed aside. So it is a very unfortunate situation. As one of a former US defense secretary wrote in his books that was published about two or 3 years ago, he said that Pakistan is one of those unfortunate countries where the ruling elite, and he included all, not just politicians or the establishment or the bureaucrats. He said he included all, including businessmen and everybody. He said the ruling elite in Pakistan has no love or concern for the country.